Welcome to Healed, Whole, Called, the podcast where stories of trauma meet the healing power of Jesus. Each week we journey with women who have walked through pain, wrestled through the process, and now stand in the promise of who God called them to be. This is more than storytelling. This is sacred space, where honesty is welcome, healing is possible, and hope is alive. And now, here's your host, Wendy Melrose.
I am so honored to welcome my friend Rachel Pinkerton, a mother, survivor, widow, and founder of Ancient Mother Wellness. Rachel's life has been marked by pain, transformation, and purpose, a series of initiations that have led her life into the service for both God and humanity. She is a survivor of narcissistic abuse, a marriage that only grew more harmful after the divorce, and instead of letting the pain define her, she allows it to refine her. Her healing journey ignited a passion to help women, especially survivors, and she became a trauma-informed holistic doula. Today, she primarily serves homeless survivors of domestic violence, walking them through some of their most vulnerable moments. After losing her second husband to a traumatic brain injury and suicide, Rachel began to recognize how many of her doula skills could be used to support the grieving and dying. She has since expanded her practice to include sacred death and grieving services, to continuing to walk with others through life's first breath and final goodbye. Rachel, we thank you for your vulnerability and your strength in your heart of service. It's an honor to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. And I know that's a lot, and I'm so intrigued by so much. I cannot wait to dive into this because I know how much of this is also very real, and they know we're knocking at the door of the 1-year anniversary of your second husband's passing. And so I'm sure some of this is a little extra raw. And so I want to respect you in this time as well.
Thank you. Just having you read that introduction made me a little bit emotional.
Oh, well, I know that there's a lot to unpack there, but what is the moment or the season of hardship that you've walked through? I know there was a lot that you mentioned, but which one of them's like really stand out and where you feel called today?
That's a good question. I feel like each experience that I've had has compounded on each previous experience, and it's led me to here today. So every step that I've gone through, I've learned something that was a predecessor to something greater. After my divorce, I learned a lot about abuse. I learned a lot about starting to stand up for myself and not just give my whole self away to where I was being destroyed. But I also was still stuck in victim mode. I just thought something bad happened to me. And it wasn't until more events happened later on that I started to realize, okay, I'm attracting things because of me, and I had to get out of victim mode and find the healing that would help me to not only stop attracting negativity and people who seek to do harm, but also grow into somebody who could be of service to others.
Well, would you like to share some of the things that if someone's listening, they're like, and they don't know that they're doing that? What was it that made you realize that you were attracted? What were the things or the warning signs or, signals?
Yeah, that's a good question. When I started to see other people after my divorce, and I noticed patterns of behavior, and I thought to myself, it's not possible that every man can be this selfish or this manipulative. It must, why do I keep meeting these people? And so I had to recognize the pattern first. And then I had to acknowledge that the common denominator was me.
Oh, man, that had to be a little bit harsh.
It was really painful. It was really painful because before I wanted to just blame my ex-husband, childhood trauma, or I wanted to blame the church that enabled it to happen, no matter how many times I asked for help.
Sure.
And so if you can sit down and honestly reflect, are you blaming everybody else,
Right.
it doesn't mean that you caused the abuse. It doesn't, take away responsibility from that other person, but that's the only way that you're going to stop the pattern in your own life.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I even noticed it after the divorce that I went through, and then I started dating again, and but I knew God had chosen someone for me. He promised me it. So every day, every month, I would like meet a different guy. So from November to May, uh, sequentially, I like every one of them. They would end. I would ask the Lord, like, if this is not who you handpicked for me, take them out. Like, don't kill them. Just get them out of my life. Well, every single time, it was not who it was. And I was telling my cousin Dino about it, and he goes, "Do the opposite." So I literally, the next person I dated, I chose based on the opposite, because it was the opposite pattern. And he and I got married 6 months later, and it's 7.5 years later, and it's the easiest marriage I've ever had. But it took me to look at the opposite, like, quit repeating the pattern, do the opposite and reverse it. It worked for me. I can't say it's always that simple, but I do see what you're talking about in it. And I didn't really go through that particular exercise, but when something keeps happening over and over and over again, maybe, just maybe, it's what you're doing.
Well, it's part of what you're doing, but it's also part of how you're conditioned, because so many abuse victims were also abused in some way as a child. They're used to it. They don't realize that anything is unusual. And so it's not always your behavior. It's that a lot of people know who to target. They can see your vulnerability and that you're an easy target. And it's, as an adult, it's your job to heal and gain the skills that you need to not be an easy target.
Oh, that's so good. So tell me about the process when everything began to shift. Like, you recognize that it's you. What did you change, or what did you do differently, or how have things, what was that turning point, and what were the steps?
Well, my whole life shifted, and it was actually very traumatic, because when I noticed the patterns, I also noticed the same abusive patterns in the other institutions that I was involved in, the church I was involved in, politics, just everything. So it was a huge shift, because I ended up leaving the faith that I was raised in. That was all of my family and friends, who I still love and respect, but I had to make the shift, because once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it, that it was enabling that behavior. So I had to do a lot of deconstructing work in my beliefs. I realized that I had been taught to be codependent, to be giving to the point of self-harm. And when I was doing that reflecting work and learning about narcissism and codependency, I realized that codependency is a reflection of narcissism, and that they actually have a lot of similar toxic traits, which was horrifying to me.
Right. Hey, I'm not like that person.
Well, so for example, one thing I realized is codependents will kind of lie in the way a narcissist will lie for the sake of being loved.
Wow.
So, for example, my interests would shift to the interests of the person I wanted to love me.
Yeah.
One silly example was, even before my marriage, I grew up with the New Jersey Devils hockey team, and I loved them. And because I wanted this boy to like me, and he liked the New York Rangers, now I liked the New York Rangers. So I was lying about who I was to gain love. And that's another sign of codependency and of a toxic trait. And if I had always been true to myself and my interests, maybe not every relationship would work out, but the right one would.
Right. Wow, that's really interesting, because I mean, I did that a lot myself, growing up, now being 47. I'm actually rediscovering what I really like, as God like recreates me in the image that who is Wendy, right? Who is Rachel? What does she love? What do they love? And it's been kind of like, oh wait, I don't care about any of this stuff anymore. Do I like the St. Louis Cardinals? Only when they're winning. But anyway.
No, it's true. Learning who you actually are is a huge step in the recovery process. And
yeah. So, did anything surprise you in the way that like God really moved in your life? Like he revealed all these different things. You had to walk away from, you did a denomination of faith, a particular group. But did God surprise you in any way in the way that he may show up personally for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I became so much closer to God through the whole process, because I was stripped of all of the formalities and rituals that I was raised with.
Mm-hmm.
And I really just had to dig deep and find my own personal relationship with God and finally trust my intuition and the direct messaging from God for myself instead of the pressures of outside messaging. So that alone for me is a miracle. And I'm really grateful for the relationship that I was able to gain with the divine. So I definitely became more spiritual through the process. I went on a huge journey for truth in all directions, the conspiracy world, the spirituality world, just anywhere. I was so hungry for truth. Um, and I feel like I've found a lot of it, but I also acknowledge that the more I know, the more I don't know.
Right.
And getting to a place where you're okay with that not knowing is where you can truly live a life of truth. And maybe you'll learn that you were wrong in some places, but like it's really the only place, in my opinion, where you can be both humble and genuine at the same time.
Yeah. Well, and then I'd love for us to spend some time on where you are today and how God is using that story. Because when I was reading about how you're what was the specific word that I read? It was instead of a birth doula, it's a holistic, trauma informed holistic doula. Like, share more about what that is.
Yeah. Well, during my marriage, I had two beautiful daughters and no support. Both during the actual births, he was very uninterested in being there, and not an active partner. And then when they were at home, he would rather be at the office than doing anything else. And it was, he would consider me to be abandoning them if he needed to help in any way. So while I was still married to him, a friend of mine asked me to be her birth coach, and I agreed. And it was the most spiritual experience of my life, witnessing this life come onto the earth. It was incredible. I was much more aware than I was of having my own children.
It's different. Yeah. Having been a birth doula myself, it's like when even though the mother is safe, just the emotion of bringing that life into the world, it's like it moves me and it like moves you in a way you cannot explain.
It really does. I've been doing it for a while now and I still cry at every birth. So I just feel like it was a few years after my divorce and my kids were a little bit older. So I thought, okay, now's the time I'm going to actually do a training to be a doula. So I did, and God just knew exactly where I needed to be. He started putting me in contact with people who ran domestic violence shelters. And I still had my corporate job. And so I thought this will be great. I'll get some experience by volunteering. And I just started learning the stories of these women who were escaping domestic violence, had absolutely nothing but the love for their unborn child. And it still is like such an honor to serve them. And I was so grateful for my experience because it was so easy to be compassionate with them, to understand the signs of their trauma, to understand what to look for during or after a birth that could be triggering to them. You know, the signs of them going into trauma, and some of them have much worse stories than I do. So it's just been a real honor and blessing that I had the experience that let me be by their side when they didn't have anybody else.
Well, and then now that even with, so obviously, you know, you feel very called for the birth side of it, but then now even with death of your second husband, going into the death doula stuff, what have you learned, or what can you share with someone, and when would you think someone would need that? Is it more hospice related? Like, share more on
Yeah. What I offer is a little bit niche. So I don't do the full spectrum of a typical death doula who will help you plan a funeral, plan where you go into hospice care, that sort of thing. When my husband passed away, I had a dream. Some might call it a vision, some might call it astral traveling, where I was able to be with him and help him pass into the next lifetime. And I was shown different, you know, religious rites that were kind of related to how Mary Magdalene helped Jesus to pass when he was crucified. And it was just such a potent experience. When I woke up, I was like, oh, I think that there is some service here that can be done. Like some of the, so I actually took one of the things that I saw and I incorporated it into my husband's celebration of life event. And we did a prayer and guided meditation to help him move on, but also to help the grieving to move on. And so a lot of what I offer is more on the spiritual side, people who would like to find comfort through some kind of spiritual ceremony.
Okay. Well, that's really interesting. And you know, having watched your journey really more online, by Facebook, you know, just seeing how much God has moved you into your purpose and through your grief, through the terrible times, and you know and I could just see how passionate you are because of what you've lived through. So if someone here listening, when I know there's a lot of different topics going on, but if there was one thing that you wanted to encourage a listener, if they're going through something very specific that you've been through, whether the narcissistic abuse or the awareness that, hey, maybe there's something I need to change or just become aware of myself. And when I say change, people, I mean more like becoming more like Christ, not necessarily changing to be better for the world, but better for self. And or is it more like when it comes to birth doula or even the death process? Or maybe you want to share something for all four categories, because I know you've been through so much and you help the world in so many ways. What word of encouragement would you have for one or all of them?
Sure. The biggest one that I would say is that there is a purpose for everything that you go through. Sometimes people take their negative experiences and let it turn them bitter and angry, and then they pass that trauma on to other people.
Yeah.
But if you have a more holistic and godly perspective of what's going on, every experience that you have is an initiation, and you can use it to better yourself. You can use it to find ways to help others. And when you're in it, it sucks really bad. But also maintaining the perspective that you're going to learn something from it and that it will end at some point. That's the message that I hold close for myself. And it helps me to get through everything that I go through and I'm still going through. The message that I would give to birthing mothers is that you have, and I think this actually applies to anyone, you have so much more power than you know that you do.
It's so true.
We are innately divine and we have the power of creation and we have the power to do that on our own terms. We don't have to be listening to the pressures of our moms or of the medical system. We can, our bodies are fully capable, our spirits are fully capable, and we can have a beautiful birth. And this can translate into life. We can make these same sovereign decisions for ourselves in every aspect of life.
It's so true. It's so true. Well, I really appreciate everything that you've shared. My prayer over you and your daughters and your life, and those who are listening, if you're going through anything like this, I want you to always remember that God is everywhere. He's omnipresent. And so you're never alone, regardless of if you're in the thick of it or you're coming out of it, or you don't even know you're about to go into it. And my prayer is that you always remember that, just like she said, you're never alone. And remember, God lives in us. So he really just this close away from us is saying, hey, I kind of need your help. We should ask him before we need the help. But he's definitely there after we need the help, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I've learned so much about prayer and being closer to the divine also.
So, well, my gosh, thank you so much, Rachel, for sharing your heart with us today. To our listeners, remember your story isn't over and you are not disqualified by what you've been through or going through. And with Jesus Christ, you are healed, whole, and called. Thanks again.
Thank you for joining us on Healed, Whole, Called. If this episode spoke to your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe and share it with someone who needs to know that healing is possible, purpose is real, and God is still restoring. And before you go, visit resilience-press.com and download your free copy of Get to the Point of Self-Publishing, Wendy's guide to help you move from stuck to published with clarity and confidence. You'll find it in the free resources section. Until next time, stay rooted in truth, covered in grace, and always moving toward the promise.